settlers may have nestled rather than dwelt in temporary pits dug in the ground, cased around inside with timber and bark, and roofed with bark laid over raised spars. These pit shelters were known in Europe from the Middle Ages, and this is how the first settlers in both New Netherlands, and New England are known to have lived until they could build more permanent housing. The permanent house was often built right over the pit, which then became the cellar. By 1692, at least one of them, David Ackerman, had erected a handsome stone and brick house. But before we get to that, I want to show you that the picture next here. Let me show you. Yes, this will give you a look, kind of a skeletal look down into the pit, so you could see how they dug it out and made this frame to put a roof on. David Ackerman erected a handsome stone and brick house, still standing still standing at 413 East Saddle River Road. It still stands today, and in fact is for sale if you're interested. It started out about $700,000 in the week that we went there, and shortly after, it was down to $545,000. And David and I took a long tour of this house, an hour and a half. And I fell in love, absolutely, with the planks on the floor. They are 14 inches wide. Oh my goodness. Shining, gleaming, pristine. I wanted to lie down on that floor and die. There are wonderful aspects of the house, but we couldn't figure out how to make it livable for us, if you know what I mean. Yeah. Certain things were done, but certain weren't. But my point here is that we went down into the basement, and David was looking even more carefully than I, and we could see where it was a pit house. Yeah. And they put brick walls, and there was a fireplace down there, and it really was amazing to see that this had once been a hole in the ground that they lived in. And then they built the house over it. It's got a huge plot of land around it, at least half an acre, right, David? But it's all lawn, and David couldn't see himself out there. But if any of you ever get a chance to go into any of these old houses, go in, because it's amazing to imagine how the people must have lived at that time. Now, this house is the Steuben house. That's a beautiful one, and it's bigger.
Steuben, were they Steuben glass?
No. The date of this house was 1752. Now, I don't really know that it wasn't related to the people.
You know what I mean.
Yes, sure. Steuben glass, right. The Steuben house was a home and store of Jan and Annette Ackerman. There were Ackermans all over this area at that time. He had a big family that came over from the Netherlands. The house became bigger as the family became wealthy in trade, shipping on the Hackensack River. So I think that is some kind of a museum that you can go in.
Yes, it is. Yeah. Where is that?
Pardon me?
Where is that?
It's located
Near
By the first half of the 1800s, a lot had happened to the country at large. From the end of the Revolutionary War to the close of the Civil War, there was a parade of illustrious presidents: Washington, Adams, Jefferson, Madison, Monroe, and Lincoln. Inventions such as the railroad, the steamboat, and the telegraph brought the people of the United States and the countries of the world together. But the outlook was bleak. We had won our independence, but we had lost our markets at home and abroad. A depression was upon us. Discontent and unrest threatened to snuff out our newly won freedom. One of the areas little affected by these trials was the tract of real estate we know today as Ridgewood, and there was good reason for this. Only a handful of settlers lived within our boundaries. There were only a few rutted roads, the primary function of which was to enable people to reach destinations elsewhere. Aside from the scattering of farms, this was 6 square miles of wooded wilderness. The area could easily have been nominated the part of Bergen County least likely to amount to anything. Precious little happens here. Occasionally a few houses were built, but mostly by descendants of the settler families. Okay, the Indians. Now, wait a minute, I'm missing the Indians here. What happened to my Indians? And then there were the Indians, Lenape Indians primarily. At the time of European settlement, there were an estimated 15,000 Lenape in approximately 80 settlement sites around much of New York City area, including the Ridgewood area, alone. They certainly outnumbered the meager number of Dutch farmers, about 24, who first settled the area to be known as Ridgewood. For the most part, the Indians and white men had a friendly relationship based on trading. The Lenape were a powerful Native American nation in the 16th and 17th centuries, but smallpox devastated these native communities, as with most other Indians in this country. Okay. Now we were down to precious little is happening here. And we can go to our train. Now I am a big train buff. So in looking for train pictures, I was looking for one that was kind of the age of when the railroad station was built and when commuters started going back and forth. And the most significant event in the history of Ridgewood was the coming of the railroad. The opening of the single-track railroad in 1848 probably caused no stir because there was no stop here. The nearest one was Hohokus, and mail for our village was dropped off there and delivered to us by foot or horseback. Now, what I love about this picture, which is really contemporary to the time, was that it was steam, but it was fueled by wood. So look at that humongous pile of wood in what's called the tender, all set to go all the way to Hohokus. And parts north. And look at those guys standing there.
That's all right, I paid $3 a gallon.
There's 5 guys there, and one of the guy in the white apron, I suspect he's the one who loads it into the furnace there, and I couldn't figure out which one is the engineer. But I thought this was a marvelous train to have ridden on.
Oh yeah, 3 with the dog. There are 3 in the middle. Yeah, there was 6. Yeah, 3 by 6.
The first commuter trains were quite a sight to behold. The engines burned wood. Equipment consisted of 4 coaches, 2 English compartment cars, and 2 other cars made in the English style that were used only on holidays and special occasions. A new depot at Godwinsville, which I believe is our station location, in 1859, began to attract other settlers and visitors from New York and stimulated the building of boarding houses and a hotel. Soon, 4 trains each way stopped at the station, and the people reported they were well satisfied with their accommodations. New York visitors were primarily from Brooklyn, which had grown substantially over the years. My grandfather was from Brooklyn. Brooklyn summers were oppressively hot, with a garbage/sewer stench that was relentless and unbearable. To escape the atmosphere and the illness it generated, families traveled in summer to the Jersey Shore, but soon began taking a shorter trip to enjoy the bucolic green forests of Bergen County. As New Yorkers moved here, what might be termed the first modest but real estate boom developed. Some of the barns were being broken up, and residences were being built on speculation. The real estate market flourished until 1873, when a disastrous panic hit the nation. Banks, brokerage firms, railroads failed. On September 20th of that year, the stock exchange closed down at noon. Thousands were ruined, and in Ridgewood, housing development came to a standstill. Things finally got moving again by 1880, and during the next decade, the town began slowly to take on the appearance of a substantial community. There was prosperity in Godwinsville and every other station along the line. Now let's take a hop, skip, and a jump forward to 1909, the year the Ridgewood Women's Club was formed. The population then was about 5,400. That's a lot. And financially, the town and its families were doing well. Husbands were commuting to New York City, while wives were taking care of the home and children. Many families could afford to have cooks, nannies, cleaning staff, and gardeners or chauffeurs. There were still horseshoeing businesses, a feed warehouse, coal sheds, and hogs were still being raised on East Saddle River Road. I don't know what it is on East Saddle River Road. Ice was an important product for residential and commercial cooling. Cement sidewalks were new, and moving pictures were being shown at the Opera House. But why would the women consider forming a club for themselves, one wonders. It's helpful to remember that in those times, everything moved at what we today would call slow motion. I tried to put myself in their place. Why would I want to join a club strictly for women? My answer was, out of boredom. Women need to talk with each other about everything, without comments from husbands or children, or social restrictions on what can or cannot be discussed, and our brains need to be stimulated. Few young wives in that time had been to college, and their husbands did not consider it necessary. But as we know, the brain does not stop working when one puts on a wedding band. Women played bridge frequently, some would say constantly, but the activities list for women was short. They could hardly organize a girls' weekend in Vegas. So they talked it over. They considered the possibility of forming a club to hear and discuss topics of timely interest, a kind of higher education for married women. Whatever they chose to do, it would have to meet with the approval of the men. They were, after all, only known by their husbands' names. In all the early records, through the 1950s, which surprises me it was that long, not only of the Women's Club, but in all our written and published documents, women are recorded with their husbands' names, such as Mrs. John Smith. My mother was Mrs. Chauncey Mitchell, Jr. In the 1963 membership, senior members are still listed that way, but the junior women added their first names in parentheses. By 1983, the member list had the given name of the women, with the husband's name in parentheses. The first meeting of the Ridgewood Women's Club was held October 22nd, 1909, with Mrs. Fanny Caldwell Allen as president. Formally stated, the purpose for which the Women's Club of Ridgewood is formed are the mutual improvement of its members through study and social intercourse, and the active promotion of civic and social betterment. I suspect Mrs. Fanny Caldwell Allen was a tough cookie. Meetings were every 2 weeks, and a fine of 5 cents was assessed if the member was late, arriving after the meeting was called to order. And you know who he was.
There's a spoiler!
Or was absent for a good reason. Dues were $1 a year. Sections called departments included civics, current topics, and domestic science. What husband would disapprove of that? Added later were music, drama, travel, history, and business. All the good stuff. Lunch or refreshments were served. Now the girls could talk. All meetings during this decade, by the way, were held in different members' homes, so it was a great opportunity to get to know the neighbors. The minutes of every meeting, and this was every 2 weeks, remember, were recorded by the secretary in longhand with perfect penmanship, a completely lost art today, except in the case of Rita and myself. In almost excruciating detail. When describing a musical presentation, for example, not only were all the performers mentioned by name, but every piece of music played was named, as well as the composer, including a thumbnail description of his life. Every report that was read, every announcement that was made, every question that was raised, every future plan that was mentioned was included. Mary Alice and I were drowning in detail, but it was fun. Minutes are recorded in large ledgers similar to those viewed by accountants. There were no corrections, scratch-outs, cross-outs, no errors. I have to believe they were written in the secretary's home, very carefully, over many hours. In that, I gave you a handout of about 6 pages, which are samples of different things related to the period. I might have included a photocopy of it, just to give you a clue. The books fall apart when you hold them in your hands, so you have to be, they would not stand up to, us all looking through it. Social, charitable, and services to the community were not officially on the list or emphasized. It's not that the Women's Club was unwilling to do good deeds. In the early years, they always responded to changes in society. They sold Liberty bonds in 1917. They made hospital garments and surgical dressings for the Red Cross in 1918, as well as entertaining 50 soldiers from Camp Meredith with a supper and dance, and contributed to their Christmas celebrations. In civic affairs, Henrietta Howes was elected to the Board of Education in 1921. Now, that was a real coup. They'd been trying to do this for a number of years, and it was only a year after women got the vote. So hooray for Henrietta. During that first decade, membership increased each year, from 63 in 1909 to 90 in 1911, then 202 in 1913, 245 in 1914. A steady increase to 330 in 1918. Membership dropped a bit to 216 in 1919, perhaps due to World War I, but was up again to 316 in 1921. But with the onset of the Great Depression in 1930, there was a growing pressure on the club, perhaps from within the club as well as from the community, to admit more members and focus on more social services. The club's response was to form the Junior Women's Club of Ridgewood in 1928. Its constitution says that the number of active members shall be limited to 125, and they are eligible to membership between the ages of 18 and 30. Upon reaching the age of 30, they shall either resign or be placed upon the waiting list of the Women's Club to be admitted to membership as vacancies occur. Meanwhile, remaining junior members. The response would provide a place for the many young women, married or single, in the community and allow them to perform social service activities. There was a definite slant toward assigning charitable work to the juniors, perhaps because the seniors were happy with their social and civic slot. You can sense this by reading on page 3 of your handout. You don't have to do it now because I'm going to read it. The statement by Mrs. P.M. Van Huck, president of the seniors, upon forming of the Junior Women's Club. Why a Junior Women's Club, she wrote. This question has a rather familiar ring to most of us. We hear it from our elders and from our contemporaries. And the answer? In this village, there is a large group of young women. Their school days are over. A majority of them married and carrying the responsibility of a home, all of whom possess surplus energy and a fund of sympathy for others. Left to themselves, they would settle down in little groups of intimate friends. The real thrill of satisfaction to be derived from doing together something for others less fortunate than they might be. It might never be enjoyed. So we're giving them this opportunity. In 1931, the combined membership of the two clubs was 1,160, leveling off at 963 in 1932. It dipped below 800 in the Depression and war years and climbed back to 1,000 after the war. In 1971, the Women's Club was declared the largest in New Jersey and the third largest in the country. What have we got here? There it is. I must first say several things about the Depression. First, the village was one of the last communities in the nation to be struck by the winds of the Great Depression. Despite its commuting men's deep involvement in the catastrophe that began on Wall Street in 1929, most of the families in the village had no first-hand experience in the ordeal until the collapse of the Fidelity Title and Mortgage Guarantee Company. Some of you probably know that. I don't know that thing. Once Fidelity had fallen, hundreds of families were suddenly and desperately poor. One YMCA fund campaigner recalls working in one of the splendid older parts of town. At one house, an eminent elder citizen invited him to come in. The room was covered by a magnificent oriental rug. The furniture was superb and antique. My wife cannot come downstairs, the householder said. I came to the door only so that you would understand why I cannot help this year. We have had nothing to eat today. Oh. Then there was a run on the First National Bank and Trust Company. Long lines of frenzied people formed for blocks ready to demand their money. The Women's Club did a magnificent thing. Molly Kindell was president. I don't know if I pronounced it correctly, Kindell or Kindell. She called an emergency meeting of her board that morning and brought to our newspaper a statement of complete confidence in the bank, which we published in a prominent box on the front page, which was headed "Plenty of Money" in huge headlines across the top. These papers were published before noon and distributed to the lines still standing inside and outside the bank. The tide was turned. Tables were spread with white tablecloths. and sandwiches and coffee were served at the noon hour to those prepared to ruin the bank by taking out their savings. And who could serve coffee and sandwiches better than the Women's Club? Prominent citizens came in to deposit funds rather than take them out. The bank was saved. In 1921, the club bought the lot where the clubhouse now stands. They also established a day nursery to be used by small children, club women, and others during the time of meetings. The clubhouse cost $118,000 to build and opened May 29, 1928. The desperate poverty created by the Depression persisted well into the 40s and throughout World War II. Children were especially affected, and the Junior Women's Club responded in a way that was memorable, heartrending, and wonderfully effective. For many years, members collected funds throughout the town in milk bottles to buy milk for the children. My mother, Ann Mitchell, had the honor of being president of the juniors during 2 of those years. I have included in your handout one annual report that provides descriptions of specific families they served. So make a cup of tea, grab a box of tissues, and read them. You will feel proud to be a member. I have no idea when the milk fund ceased, but it seems to have gone on for a long time. Perhaps our panel would know what year it finally stopped. But it seemed to be going on into the 80s or something. The club was very active during World War II and even managed to pay off the mortgage on the clubhouse in 1949. Now, the town of Ridgewood was very sympathetic to its residents who could no longer afford to spend summers at the Jersey Shore. So they built Creighton Pond, a beautiful swimming and recreation area for all town citizens. So everybody went on a staycation instead of a vacation. Now, retrieving pictures from the archives here was extraordinarily difficult. Most of them were in newspapers, and they just don't scan. But I finally found this one, and this was the best of the lot. And here's the caption. 9 charter members were present at the silver anniversary dinner of the Business and Professional Department, held in the Ridgewood Women's Club's auditorium on Thursday evening. The group is just 1 year older than the clubhouse, which will observe its 25th birthday next spring. And then it lists everybody there, and I have the names if anyone wants to look at them. I'm going to wind up my talk now and turn it over to our invited members for their memories. And you'll find out a lot more from them that I know nothing about. But just remember, everything that's said in the clubhouse stays there. Oh, one more. Not many women had college educations then. It was a different world. Our members today are a very educated group, many with executive positions in finance, banking, and industry. I've only been a member for a year, but I find the women I've met to be smart, interesting, talented, and a lot of fun. Today in Ridgewood, there are approximately 25,000 people. 12,500 are women. Let's go get them.
I'm going to address my first question to June Reitmeyer, who has the distinction of being the oldest member that we know of Women's Club, and I'd like her to tell us when she joined and why.
I've been a member since 1957. Since 1957. When we were married, I lived in Wyckoff, and I didn't know anyone. I thought I all the way left my home in Clifton, which is not today a big distance, but I didn't know anyone in the area. And my husband encouraged me to put my name on the list and at the Junior Women's Club. He said there's a very lovely clubhouse in Ridgewood, and you put your name on the list, and you're required to have somebody endorse you, and then you'll wait until you can become a member. And if you do that, you're going to meet some very lovely people. And enjoy it. So that was all true.
Now, Joanne, can you Joanne, can you please tell me when you joined and what the club was like when you joined, and the difference between now and then? Just touch on it a little bit.
So I'm a little bit younger than Judy because I joined in '59. So I wasn't too far behind Judy. But I think the reason I joined, I had 2 young children, and as was reported from our lovely program here, we needed something to do. And this was, friends had joined the juniors. And we had to wait. We had to be sponsored, as June said. We had to be approved. We had to wait until there was an opening. 125 was the limit. So when you went into the juniors, it was a very prestigious thing. And we had a wonderful group of women, always very much oriented into the community. Now, we always had to earn points. Now, this is one thing. If you were a junior, you had to earn, I think it was 50 points. And every time you did something for the community, you earned points. Now, if you did not have your points up to date, you were asked to leave. So everybody was very, there was a waiting list. So, you know, they were waiting for people not to make it. And so, absolutely. So we were very conscious of the fact that we were community oriented. And I am wearing a Play Lady pin. When I started the juniors, I had a child that went into New York Hospital, and they were entertaining the children in New York Hospital during the day with games and books and everything. And I thought at that point, Valley Hospital was very strict about their allowing parents to stay overnight with their children, very limited in visiting hours. And so I proposed to the juniors that we start a program for Valley Hospital, and we called ourselves the Play Ladies. Now, the Play Ladies would go in with this basket of things that we had acquired, and they would entertain the children that couldn't get out of bed or were in Valley Hospital recuperating. And that was a good point earner, because everybody wanted to be a Play Lady, because there were a lot of points in that. But it was very well received. Then, of course, the hospital opened up and there was more visiting hours, so we didn't do that. But as far as the milk, shaking the milk bottle, we were all out there with our straw hats. The juniors were a fun organization. We had wonderful times. Our husbands were included in all our social things. And so it was very nice to have that out when you had young children. And most of us had young children at that point. So it was the place to be. And juniors was a very, very gratifying organization for all the young women in the community. And I do commend the juniors that have kept this club together. Thank you, ladies, all you wonderful ladies that came from the juniors. It was sad to see the juniors go, but time marches on.
Thank you, Joanne.
I'd like to ask Greta to address the same question because I think her opinion might be a little different from the others. And I'll just hand it over.
Well, my experience was a little bit different. I came here in 1964. We bought a house on the east side of 17, a little Cape Cod, and I started to stay home from work 2 years later. And one day I was walking in Ridgewood, and it was on a Saturday, and I saw these women, young women, very attractive, with their baskets or whatever they were shaking for the milk fund. And I turned around and I asked the girl nearest to me, I said, "Oh, your organization looks very interesting. How can I join?" And she turned to me rather imperiously and said, "Oh, you have to have a sponsor." So I said, "Well, how do I get a sponsor?" "Well, you'll just have to get a sponsor." And so I decided it was a very exclusive organization. So anyway, around 1979, I was in a conversation at a political event with the person that sold me my house in Ridgewood, and her name was Bernice Teasley. And she was in the women's club, and she said, "Oh, you have to join." And I said, "Well, gee, are you sure they would want me?" And I told her my experience. And she said, "Oh, yeah." She said, "You know, it was just one of those things." So she did sponsor me, and I came into the club, and the first job I had was hospitality. And I would make cookies and cakes and things and bring them up to the board. The board meeting had a very structured agenda, and there would be a break in between. And it would go on for like 3 hours sometimes. So I had to provide, or whoever was in charge, the coffee and tea and cakes and whatever, coffee cake. So that was nice. That went on for a couple of years. So I had other jobs after that, but my initial experience was not very good, but after that, I had very good experience. And I will say that the Women's Club has helped me through a lot of hard times in my life and been very, very important. So that's all I have to say about that.
Well, Susan, we might as well ask you the same questions and say a little bit about also the activities that they did back in the day that maybe they don't do now.
Okay, in 1973, I joined the juniors. A couple of my neighbors said to me, "You know, you have a baby now, you really should get out." And so they worked it out for me. And at that time, juniors had a babysitting section downstairs. So that was, once your children were like 2 or 3 years old, you could bring them down there. And for a fee, there was a babysitter that was there, which was very helpful. When I first joined, I had to go be interviewed at somebody's house. And then after that, when I was accepted, then they had a lovely cocktail party for the new members and their husbands, which was really great. And that was the other thing I thought about juniors. Besides having the very important charitable things that we did, there were also great social events. So it was great. And so the husbands were really, really included, which was nice. When we joined, every member of the juniors had to do only 20 points.
Oh, is it?
You had to earn 20 points a year, and you had to be on a committee and earn points on that committee. And then you had to assist at an hour for the different fundraising things. And in the beginning when I joined, the important fundraising activity was an antique show, which used to take place on Thursday, Friday, and that was great. There were gathering here in the living room, it was really a lot of fun. And that went on until about 84, 85. And then they changed to a roadshow, Oriental roadshow sale. And that was great, and that went on for a number of years. That was a much easier event to have at the clubhouse. And then eventually the roadshow and the house tour came together because it took a little while to get the house tour going. And so then once the house tour was good, then dropped the roadshow. You also, the tag days, every member had to do the tag days, and that was the milk bottle thing. We would do stand at in front of different stores and things and everything. I can remember I was at one of the grocery stores most of the time, and it was funny. We straw hats on and these bottles, and the money from the tag day sale went to social service children for milk and cheese. So that was really nice. It was very important. In the middle 80s. So that was great. And then the other thing that we had to do was serve at 2 luncheons. You had to either be here at 10 o'clock sharp to set the table. You had to either maybe serve me the main course and clear the dishes at the end of the luncheon. You had to pour coffee, or here's the one, clear ashtrays and tablecloths. And if there was an important reason for your being unable to fulfill one of these requirements, you must present these reasons in writing to the vice president within 3 weeks of missing the requirement. So it was very strict back in those days. We have it so easy these days.
We're trying to get in there.
Did you ever encounter somebody who was actually thrown out?
No, I think what they did, they made them make that up somehow.
Oh,
They actually weren't thrown out.
right.
We never proved.
Well, what I've learned so far is that if you want to join the club, don't buy a house on the other side of Route 17. and just hook up with somebody who's already in the club, because they won't let you in if you're not. Now, I didn't, in my readings and lookings, I did not find, personal prejudices, like not letting in Italians or black people. Of course, there weren't any black people, or there might have been a few black people in town.
A few years back, we had a couple, but they didn't seem to last. I don't know why.
Did they join?
They joined.
Ah,
They were members.
that's great.
Yeah, but there was one time where somebody criticized Andrea Falco, who was our president, and she said something, and it was like the person wasn't very nice, and I guess she thought the club was anti-Jewish. And I said to Andrea, I said, so what happened? Did you just let her speak? She said yes, and then at the end she told us that she was Jewish as the president. No, but what I'm saying is,
Hello, my name is Jean.
no, but she like this outside person had like some resentment towards the club and was saying, so you're anti, and then she just let the woman have her piece, and then she said, by the way, I'm the president and I'm Jewish. So,
Were there